Nora Calloway found out her brother had stolen $60 million from her the same week she found out she was dying. Not dying immediately. The oncologist in Houston had used the word aggressive, the way other doctors used concerning. Softly, like it might not land if he said it quietly enough. Pancreatic. 8 months, maybe 10 if she fought it. Nora had sat in the parking lot afterward and actually laughed because the timing was so absurd it felt like a joke someone else was telling. Then her accountant called. "The Meridian transfer," he said. "The one authorized under your signature in October. I need you to confirm it." Nora had authorized no Meridian transfer. She had never heard of Meridian Capital Partners. But there it was, $61,400,000, wired out of the family trust she and her brother Dean had inherited jointly from their father, moved into an account that traced, after 3 furious days of digging, back to a shell company registered in Dean's wife's maiden name. Dean. Her baby brother. The one she'd covered for when he wrecked their father's boat at 19. The one she'd hired straight out of business school to run the trust's investment arm, over the objections of 2 board members who'd said gently that nepotism wasn't a strategy. The one who had apparently spent the last 4 years building a paper trail so clean that if Nora hadn't been dying and desperate to leave her affairs in order, she never would have looked closely enough to find it. She didn't call the police. This was the part that surprised even her. Dean had stolen everything, not just money, but the version of their family she'd spent her whole life protecting, the fiction that the Calloways, despite their father's cruelty and their mother's early death, were fundamentally decent people who took care of each other. Nora could have had him arrested within the week. Federal wire fraud, embezzlement from a trust, enough paper to bury him. Instead she drove to his house in Austin, sat across from him at his own kitchen table, and asked him to explain it to her face. Dean didn't deny it. That was the first twist. She'd expected denial, expected the wounded outrage of a man caught, and instead he just looked tired, older than 38, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and was almost relieved to set it down. "Dad's will wasn't what you think it was," he said. He told her about a codicil sealed until their father's estate closed, that Nora had never seen because their father's lawyer, the same lawyer who'd handled everything since Nora was 12, had quietly buried it at Dean's request, for a fee neither of them had ever declared. The codicil revealed that their father had, in the last 2 years of his life, drained nearly $70 million from the family trust into a private account, intending to leave it entirely to a second family Nora and Dean had never known existed. A woman named Raina in San Antonio and a daughter, Camila, 26 years old, who shared their father's exact laugh according to the one time Dean had met her. Dean had found out first 6 years ago, going through their father's private files after a stroke had left him unable to manage his own accounts. He'd made a choice in that moment that he'd never told Nora about. He moved the money back into the family trust before their father died, erasing all trace of Raina and Camila's inheritance, and told no one, not his sister, not his wife, not a lawyer. He'd protected the Calloway name and buried a family in the process. "So I stole it back," Dean said. "Everything Dad tried to give away I put back where I thought it belonged. And then this year I found out Camila's been sick. Really sick. Same kind you probably don't know yet you have if the color of your face is anything to go by." Nora said nothing. He didn't know. She hadn't told him. "I panicked," Dean said. "I didn't think I deserved to just hand it to her honestly, not after what I did, not after Dad tried to give it to her and I erased it like she never existed. So I moved $60 million out through Meridian back toward her, disguised as an investment fund so it wouldn't look like charity, wouldn't look like guilt. I was going to tell you once it was done. I swear to God, Nora, I was going to tell you." The twist inside the twist. Dean hadn't stolen the money for himself. He'd stolen it to correct a theft he'd committed years earlier. One that had erased a sick young woman's entire inheritance to protect a family reputation that Nora now understood had never deserved protecting in the first place. Nora didn't forgive him. Not that night, not for weeks. But she also didn't turn him in because doing so would have exposed a truth that would have destroyed 3 lives instead of 1, and dying had made her strangely uninterested in destruction for its own sake. Instead she did something Dean never expected. She found Raina and Camila herself. Camila was in a small apartment in San Antonio, thin in the way chemotherapy makes people thin, sharp-eyed, suspicious of a stranger claiming to be a half-sister she'd never met. Raina sat beside her daughter with the wary stillness of a woman who had spent 30 years being erased by a family that considered her an inconvenience. Nora told them everything. Their father's original intention. Dean's theft of that intention. Dean's attempt, clumsy and guilty and 6 years too late to fix it. She did not tell them she was dying. That detail she kept for herself, a private ledger she wasn't ready to open for anyone. What she offered instead was restructuring, not 60 million moved secretly through a shell company, but a formal legal division of the Callaway Trust 3 ways, done in daylight with Camila and Raina's names finally on a document that acknowledged they had always belonged there. Dean agreed before Nora finished the sentence. It was, she realized, exactly what he had wanted all along and never had the courage to do honestly. The final twist came 8 months later at Nora's funeral, when Camila stood up during the reception, thinner still but in remission, the treatments funded quietly by money that was rightfully hers, and told a room full of Callaways and strangers that Nora Callaway was the only member of that family who had ever chosen her in daylight without being caught first. Dean sat in the front row and said nothing because there was nothing left to steal and nothing left to hide. For the first time in 6 years, that felt less like loss and more like the beginning of something honest. Their father's fortune had been built on secrets. It took a dying woman robbed by her own brother to finally spend it in the open.